Welcome to SF Nonprofit Spotlight, brought to you by SF Commons TV. I'm Kelly Daly. Today we talk about the big C, cancer, and how it affects so many of our lives. And joining us today is someone who leads an organization that helps patients and their loved ones face treatment and nutrition classes and other support services they need. That is Cancer Community Support, San Francisco Bay Area, and joining us today is the CEO, Rob Tufel. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm delighted to be here and talk more about Cancer Support Community and what we do.
Thank you, Rob. Now, before we talk about some of the pandemic effects on the organization, I wanted to talk about the ubiquity of cancer. You yourself are a survivor, and I'm wondering if some of your personal experiences and your insight helped you know what this community needs.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, first of all, you're right. Everybody knows someone who's had cancer. Actually, in California, every hour, 20 people every hour of every day will be diagnosed with cancer, which is an incredible amount of people. And so it isn't just that it feels like everybody has cancer. So many people have cancer and are impacted. And that's true. I did have a personal experience with cancer. When I was 30, I was diagnosed with a testicular tumor. Last year, I was diagnosed with melanoma. So those experiences have really, I think, given me insight into my work, but also I've spoken to thousands and thousands and thousands of cancer patients and their family members. So I also understand it's not just about my experience, but really have a very global view of what people are going through and those shared experiences and what happens to somebody after they're diagnosed and what happens to their family.
You help people navigate treatment and you connect them with professional counseling. But I wonder if you can tell us, when someone first gets that diagnosis and they hear the words, "You have cancer," what should they do next?
Boy, hearing those words, "You have cancer," that's one of the toughest things that a patient and a family member has to hear. And people are going through lots of different emotions. They're scared, they're overwhelmed, they're thinking about their mortality. So there's so many different things that people are going through. But what people need to know, I think that's what's important for people to know, is they're not alone. There's a lot of support out there, organizations like Cancer Support Community, that can really help you navigate this new world you're in. People they say it's like going on a trip to a foreign country where I don't speak the language. And that's what cancer feels like for a lot of people. So as an organization, we can provide support, things like support groups and nutrition classes, educational workshops. We can connect you up with other cancer patients and their families, people who can really help you navigate and guide this world. Also, our professional trained counselors can also talk to you and help you navigate and understand your experience. And really, you don't have to go through this alone. And there's always hope also. And I think sometimes when people are diagnosed, they feel hopeless. But we also know that building community and building support can make people feel more confident about their future and make them feel that they'll have a good quality of life no matter what the outcome of their disease will be.
That's great. And let's talk about equity for a moment. When we spoke earlier, you mentioned how the mortality rates in the Black cancer community were really high, and also that it can be a financial burden to get a diagnosis. What are you doing in this space to help underserved communities and address these issues?
Sure, that's a great question. We always say cancer doesn't care, right? Cancer doesn't care what your ethnicity is. They don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. I know I have to be careful talking about politics, or a Green Party or Libertarian. They don't care. Cancer doesn't care, which is true. But the reality is, for many underserved communities, what happens once they get a cancer diagnosis is different. So we know that in the Black community, the mortality rate is much higher for Black cancer patients. The survivorship rates are much lower. So why is that the case? Things like systemic racism, access to care, the list goes on. As an organization, we know that we have to do better about treating all cancer patients because we don't care who gets cancer. And so we should make sure that all cancer patients have access to services. So we are super excited because we just got a grant from Stanford, and we're working on a research project where we're actually going to be doing the needs assessment of Black cancer patients and their families in Alameda County to better understand the needs of those cancer patients, and not just the needs, but what are those barriers to accessing services? And once we complete that project, we will be looking at how we develop programs, how we craft our programs to better meet the needs of those patients. And also last year, right before the pandemic, actually, so things are on hold, of course, we're doing everything virtually, but we opened up an office in Antioch, California, in East Contra Costa County, which is one of the most underserved communities. We really felt that by going into the community to provide services, we could do a better job at reaching those people who traditionally do not get that type of support. We are also looking at the board level. How do we diversify our board to bring in different voices from different communities, and on the staff level as well? So lots of things. This is, we always say, this is not a race, it's a marathon. We want to do these things in a very deliberate way so we can have lasting change and make real impact on these communities so we can serve all cancer patients and be able to meet their needs better.
You mentioned Alameda County and Contra Costa County, and your in-person services have been tied to your center in Walnut Creek and the new one you just mentioned in Antioch. But now in this new virtual world, maybe can you talk about how the geographic boundaries of your services have changed? And also, what do you plan to keep as part of your programming going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's interesting throughout this has obviously been a really hard year for everybody, and nobody would want a pandemic. But there are some positive things that come out of this experience, like cancer as well. There are some positive things sometimes that come out for cancer patients and their families. Sometimes there are some positive things that are unexpected. So what COVID did, what the pandemic did, was really force us to look at how we can provide services virtually. And we know that for many, many patients and family members who can't get to our center because of transportation, or they're not feeling well, for lots of different reasons, having the option to participate in virtual programs really increases their access. I mean, you listen, you're never going to replace, holding someone's hand or being able to reach out and give someone a tissue. But we will, following once the pandemic ends, which it will end, we will continue to do a hybrid model. So we'll continue to offer virtual services and also do in-person services. Actually, there's some really interesting technology out there. We were just talking about this today. We want to be able to create a virtual space where you can feel like you're in the support group, maybe even if you're at home. So we're looking into some technology right now. And if there's any funders who want to do any beta testing, or all these startups in Silicon Valley who want to do beta testing with us, I invite you to talk to us. But we're looking at technology now to enhance our virtual services. But we will absolutely continue to do this. So somebody in San Francisco, somebody in Alameda County, somebody in the South Bay will be able to participate in a way that's fulfilling for them.
That's great to hear. And I'm wondering, what are you currently hearing from cancer patients who are dealing with the isolation, who are considering whether to get vaccinated now, or maybe they have to put it off with some of their care? What are you hearing from the people you serve?
Sure. We hear a lot during the pandemic. I think that mental health issues have people's mental health have been impacted during the pandemic. Obviously, that is especially true for cancer patients and their families. Things like depression has increased, anxiety, and isolation. We have the word community in our name. Public health research years ago, this is nothing new, shown that people who have a good social support system, people that have friends, have better health outcomes. So not being able to connect with people, being isolated in their homes, being especially worried if they're immune compromised, that going outside could be, they'll catch COVID in a way that some of us who aren't immune compromised don't have the same worries. So the anxiety levels, the depression, that isolation has really just increased. I mean, the virtual programming for many of our for the cancer patients and the families we serve has been an incredible link to pull them out of that social isolation. But once again, there's nothing that replaces that in-person contact. And we're looking forward to getting our community center opened again so we can start seeing people in person.
So I've read with the pandemic, a lot of people have put off their routine doctor visits. Does that concern you looking ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in so many ways we're in the moment experiencing what the pandemic is doing to us now, but we don't really know what's going to happen when we're all back together and when the pandemic ends. And certainly in the area of screening and cancer diagnosis, we saw a big, 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 I have to emphasize that, a really big drop off in the number of people who were going to get screened and get diagnosed for cancer. We also know the later you get diagnosed, the more severe the cancer could be and the harder to treat. So what we do know is that post-pandemic, we will be seeing more patients who are diagnosed later, who are sicker, and who will have different needs than patients who were diagnosed earlier. So we are anticipating and waiting for that wave, and we'll be developing our programs accordingly to meet the needs of those patients and family members who are dealing with a more advanced illness.
Mm. In the few moments we have left, Rob, I'm wondering if you can tell us some ways that we can get involved with helping cancer support community. Are there things going on this year that we might be able to attend or volunteer with?
Yes, that's a perfect question to ask. First of all, check out our website, cancersupport.net. It lists everything, all of our classes, all of our programs. We have an amazing virtual Hope Walk coming up in May. It's our second virtual walk, which I can't even believe that. We did a virtual walk last year. Super, super fun. I'm going to try and get my 92-year-old mother-in-law to get a team going with her walker, 5 steps a day. You can do it anywhere you want. You can walk, swim, jump, hop, whatever you want to do to raise money for our programs. And then super, super, super cool. In September, we are having a film festival charity gala. So we are soliciting original films about cancer and community. We have an incredible list of judges who will be judging those films from Pixar and HBO and all these really, really interesting and cool media sources. And we will be premiering those films and choosing a winner, just like the Academy Awards, on September 18th. If you're interested in helping out, getting involved, making a donation, once again, please go to our website, cancersupport.net. And if you're interested in getting our services, also go to our website, cancersupport.net, and there'll be information there about how you can get access to our programs. And I forgot to mention, everything we do is free. Doesn't cost any money. Everything we do is free, so it's available to everybody.
And Rob, my last question, I know that cancer has been around for a long, long time. I think I read in the biography of cancer, Emperor of All Maladies, that it's been around for thousands of years. And
yes,
President Nixon even really brought it to the fore when he signed the National Cancer Act in 1971, and people thought a cure was on the horizon. And yet we are still where we are today. And I'm wondering, though, if you find hope in this moment, that you see progress, that you, your staff, the people you serve, how do you think about the future?
I have seen in my time working in the cancer community, which has been about 30 years, I've seen incredible progress. In the 30s, the survivorship rates were about 1 in 5 cancer patients survived. Now it's 3 in 5. Absolutely, we have more to do. Cancer is becoming more of a chronic illness, which is a positive thing. We want to cure it, of course. I have seen vast changes. I've seen support groups of metastatic cancer, which is cancer that has spread. I've seen support groups with people who have metastatic cancer. They've been in those groups for 2 or 3 years. I have to tell you, 10, 15 years ago, if you found out you had metastatic cancer, that was an immediate death sentence. That is not true for a lot of cancers. Cancer is not one disease, of course. But we have made incredible progress. We will continue to make progress. But the bottom line is cancer patients will still need that non-medical support that we provide, especially if it's a chronic illness, because while you're surviving your cancer, there are also a lot of changes, and we are here to support the cancer patient and their family with our free programs.
Rob Tufel, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be here.
I'm joined remotely via Zoom by Dan Flanagan, the Executive Director of Friends of the Urban Forest. So Dan, thanks for being here today.
Hi, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So I think for a lot of people, I'm been a supporter of Friends of the Urban Forest for a while, and I love the fact that you guys are actually planting trees. But I think it would be really helpful if people who are listening or watching the show could understand who is the Friends of the Urban Forest, and then how do you fit into the proverbial ecosystem of San Francisco's idea of we've got greening, community engagement, education, your advocacy piece. So tell us more about Urban Forest, Friends of the Urban Forest.
Great. Well, actually, in 2 weeks, we'll start, I think, celebrating our 40th year. So we've been around for a while. We are essentially a community-based organization. We plant, now historically, during non-COVID times, we have 2 plantings every week. They're community-based all throughout the city. And we bring neighbors and volunteers together to transform neighborhoods. And we've been planting anywhere in the last couple of years, anywhere from 40, and in some cases 100 trees, 105 trees every 2 weeks. So that's how we started. And one of the things that we have evolved into is that we have been, planting trees. And then about 10 or 15 years later, they decided, great job planting trees, lovely. We should actually take care of those trees after we plant them. So the organization started a tree care program where we would plant the tree and then take care of the trees for 3 years. And then about 10 years ago, we decided, oh gosh, there's way too much impermeable surface in the city, and trees really benefit from more non-permeable spaces. So we started something called sidewalk landscaping, and we actually I think we planted our 100th program, 100th sidewalk landscape just about a year ago. And so we now open up as much sidewalks as possible. And the ideal thing would be to link 2 tree basins, and we put in native San Francisco plants. So we've been doing that now, and we've really been increasing that over the past couple of years. It's a wonderful program. And then also we've kind of grown over the 40 years. And about 15, 20 years ago, we decided that we should start giving back to the city, not only by planting trees, working with communities and developing a green infrastructure to the city, but we should also use the opportunity to educate. So about 20 years ago, we started something called Green Teens. It was youth tree care program in the beginning. And we've been doing that ever since. I think it's like 19 years now. And we have groups of 12 kids, usually 14, 18 years old, normally from the Southeast, underserved populations. And they work with us for about eight weeks, sometimes more. And we do 4 cohorts during the year. And the great thing is we give them, it's a job preparedness program. They're paid. We train them in various aspects of urban forestry, but with a real emphasis on tree care. And those kids take care of about 800 to 1,000 trees every year of the 3,500 trees that we have to take care of. And on top of that, we decided about 6 years ago, to start moving into the 18 to 24-year-old group. And we wanted to do not a workforce development program, but a workforce kind of development program where we'd be taking some of these young adults, 18 to 24, who are underserved, and we would pay them and we would try to train them in arboriculture. And to the point where we start off with 2 or 3 kids. Initially, we were working with a wonderful program called Wraparound Program out of San Francisco General Hospital. And we were the last component of that program. And they were taking folks that had been stabbed and shot from gang violence in San Francisco and thought, hey, this is a teachable moment. Perhaps we can change their lives. And so we would be the last piece of that program where they would actually work for us 30 hours a week for about 6 months. Then we decided, maybe you don't have to be shot or stabbed to have this opportunity. So we expanded it out. So now we have up to 5 folks in our green crew, we call. And serendipitously, it's been incredibly lucky that we have those folks now with COVID. And on top of all that, so that's a big part of our program now. We also moved into watering trees now for the first time. Every tree that we plant, we're trying to water a good percentage of those. Lastly, the thing that we are really quite proud of is our advocacy. And I've always considered ourselves as the Lorax of San Francisco. We're the only entity that actually speaks primarily about the trees. And we've always focused on street trees, but we're trying to talk about all the trees now. We really care about the whole urban forest. And one of the things we're most proud about is running the campaign in 2016. And for many of us, the only nice thing that happened in 2016 was the fact that Prop E basically was passed, and that took back all the street trees from homeowners and made it the responsibility of the city to take care of. They now own all the street trees because we had the most crazy regulations around street trees before 2016. Now we are one of the leaders. We are one of the leaders in the United States where we have set up a dedicated funding source in the city. Now it started off at $19 million. It's up to $20 million for the care of every single street tree in perpetuity. And that money should grow over time. So from a little nonprofit started in 1981 by a bunch of really dedicated folks who realized that you drive around the city, there weren't a lot of trees in those days. And from that point in time, we have planted almost half the street trees you see in the streets of San Francisco.
Thank you. That was great. So much of what you guys do is also in person, i.e. you have volunteers helping you plant the 60 to 100 plus trees every 2 weeks. How has COVID-19 impacted the operations of Friends of the Urban Forest, and what have you guys done to deal with that?
Well, I'll tell a little story. I was having dinner with my husband on March 6th, and we were at a really lovely restaurant, Chapeau, a little chapeau to chapeau. And I got a call, and we were doing a planting the next Saturday, March 7th. We had 60 trees being planted in the Richmond. And we'd heard rumbles during the day that, gosh, they're going to start closing down large gatherings. But we heard at actually 4:00 that afternoon that we're fine, don't go ahead and do it. And so I'm sitting in a restaurant with probably 60 people there, and I got a call at 7:00 saying, we really should cancel. Well, we had the choice to cancel or not. And I decided to cancel because when people say you have a choice to do something, I thought, we probably should take the safest route. But I'm sitting in a restaurant with 60 people, and we have to kind of re-engineer this whole planning. We have all the trees out there. All the volunteers have been invited. I wasn't a happy camper that day. So we went out in the rain the next morning, got all the trees, brought them back. And little did we know that we're moving into a different world. Now, one of the real lucky things we have is that we have a great person who does all of our HR and billing, and she just so happens to live in Hong Kong. And on Monday morning, we got on the phone, not Monday, but Monday afternoon, we got on the phone with her, and she said, prepare to shelter in place. Your office will be closed, and this is going to go on for months. And because you are 2 weeks behind where we are in Hong Kong. So at that point, we decided we better pay attention to this. So we completely re-engineered our business. We really totally depended on volunteers. They helped do tree care. They actually did all the planting with us. We facilitated the planting of homeowners and volunteers. And so we flipped it all around. And luckily we could use our internal staff. We could use the green crew, we use the green teens, and we try to do everything with our staff. And we actually closed down the office. By that Friday, everyone took their chairs home and their computers home, and we were ready to work remotely. And literally the next Monday, bingo. I think I'm very proud of the city. We moved quickly. I think that's what really helped us for the last couple of months. And so we did that. So it had a huge impact on us. And now to continue that conversation is that we literally couldn't do anything, obviously, when we were all sheltered in place, no tree planting, nothing. And we only get paid when we actually plant trees. So that was not pretty. And we were very lucky to get a PPP loan. And that kind of tied us over until June. The end of June, we were able to start planting again. And that's when we've been planting ever since. And caring for trees and doing everything else.
And Dan, over the years that you've been working there, and obviously the decades that Friends of the Urban Forest has been around, what do you feel has been the biggest impact, obviously, on our environment, but also the social justice component of greening neighborhoods, along with the training of youth and their impact on their families and the community at large?
Well, I often think that we are so well placed today with what's going on, and I always talk like a trifecta. First of all, I think in terms of climate change, we really are on the forefront, and we are the ones that have been pushing the planting of trees for a long, since 1981. And we all should be reminded is that one of the issues of, climate change is the heat island effect when you're in the built environment. And we will be experiencing more and more of that. And there are parts of this city where it is a social justice issue, is that we have treed neighborhoods that are wealthy, and we have less wealthy tree neighborhoods that have very low canopy. And so when the other thing that we did strategically is, I mentioned Prop E, when we took back all the street trees, that gave us the right, the city, and partnered with us to determine where we want to put our assets in terms of putting trees in the ground. Because in the past, we had to depend upon homeowners to put a tree in front of their house. And that was asking them to put a liability in front of their house, which was a hard sell. Thank God we were able to plant almost 50,000 trees. So now, since 2017, actually, when it started, we now could focus and bring social justice issues and environmental justice to the forefront. And the city, and I have to give Public Works and the Bureau of Urban Forestry a huge kudo here, is that they decided, we need to now work as hard as we can to equalize a canopy. So we've been focused on the southeast of the city and the western part of the city, literally since 2017. And now going forward, we have lost 70% of our funding from the city for for planting trees because of COVID, which is completely understandable. Not my first choice, but it's happened. And I think, hopefully it'll ameliorate going forward. We have state funding, and we are literally now almost exclusively planting in those underserved areas. So in terms of social justice, environmental justice, I think we're doing the right thing. And on top of that, serendipitously, we've moved into workforce development and educating, young 14 to 18-year-olds. And now actually for the 18 to 24-year-olds, we're creating a ladder opportunity for jobs, because our goal is to hire these 4 to 5 green crew for 6 months, hopefully a year, maybe 2 years, and prepare them to work for the city or work for the park and rec or somewhere else. Because with Prop E, there is a really great need on the city's part to have qualified arborists working on our tree canopy. Before the city didn't have the money. Now we have $20 million to do that. So we're trying to focus our folks that we're working with and have that be going into various departments. So in many ways, we've been doing it because this is what we believe in.
Well, thank you, Dan, for sharing all of your team's work at Friends of the Urban Forest. And we'll make sure that listeners and viewers have your contact information, website, social media, so they can follow the Friends of the Urban Forest and get engaged and, of course, support your mission. Please stay safe along with your crew and as healthy as one can. And as we work our way through the crazy new normal.
We will. Thank you very much.